Hey, hi, I'm Jerry Wise, and I've been a therapist and a relationship coach for over 45 years. And I want to speak to the part of you that's exhausted from trying to fix everything, your relationships, your reactions, who you are, and feeling like no matter what you do, nothing actually changes. If that's where you are, I want to tell you something you probably haven't heard before. You're not broken. You're just undifferentiated. You were never taught or even allowed to be self-differentiated from what your family programmed you to be. And that one process, self-differentiation, might be the most important idea you'll ever encounter. It was for me, and I had been to many therapists, tried many different techniques and ways to heal. It's also the one thing very few therapists or coaches has ever helped you focus on, which is why you stayed stuck for so many years. Because once you understand what it means and why it matters, all the problems in your life will finally start to make sense. It isn't a magic pill. It doesn't happen overnight, but the perspective shift and change can be dramatic. Self-differentiation will give you both hope and clarity on the single most important thing you need to focus on, moving forward. Why everything else you've tried hasn't worked. Most of us, especially those of us from narcissistic or dysfunctional families, have spent our whole lives trying to fix the symptoms. We try setting boundaries, we try healing our trauma, we try 12-step groups, but nothing seems to stick fully. And I don't feel as transformed as I would like to be. Sometimes we actually feel better when we've done some of these things. And some therapists really have tried to help us and in some ways have helped us. Because we are still using the tools we were handed by the very system that wounded us. We're still trying to fix our lives without realizing our lives were built around someone else's wiring. You were never allowed to fully become your real self. And that's why we stay stuck. Because no one ever taught us to become self-differentiated. What self-differentiation really is. Self-differentiation sounds like a big word, but it really is simple. It's the process of releasing the false self you were trained to be in your family of origin, so your true self can finally emerge. It means differentiating from who your family programmed you to be and separating who you really are from who your family trained and programmed you to be. It's about getting them out of you so you can finally become the person you were never allowed to be. I know a lot of people, including myself, tried to get me out of my family. But I found my family followed me internally. So a goal shift happened. How do I get the family out of me rather than me out of the family? Self-differentiation is the ongoing process of defining, regulating, and declaring who you truly are in relationships, even when others resist, move closer, or pull away. It's about staying fully you, even in the presence of pressure, guilt, or emotional pull. Not because you tolerate more toxicity, but because it no longer has any grip on you. When you have a solid self, other people's problems, dysfunctions, manipulations lose their influence over who you are and how you feel and who you choose to be. You were likely raised in a family where you had to feel what they felt, be what they needed you to be, and constantly perform, fix, manage, absorb, or stay invisible to yourself. That's emotional enmeshment. That's overcloseness. In the beginning, it's mostly an experience we are unaware of. What I found when I began the work on myself is that I wasn't aware how enmeshed and how attached emotionally, mentally, in program ways I was to my family of origin. And when I am over close and I begin to see it, and again, one of the things we have trouble with when we start this work is we don't see it at the beginning. It almost sounds like this is not even true, but it is true. Your true self cannot thrive in that kind of over closeness, because when you're trained to be overly close, you end up deleting who you are instead of differentiating who you are and becoming the real you. How does poor self-differentiation show up in your life? Let me ask you a few questions. Do you ever feel overwhelmed by other people's emotions, even when they're not yours? Do you struggle with anxiety that seems to come out of nowhere? Do you find yourself reacting before you can think clearly? Do you feel like you're playing a role in your relationships, not being your real self? That's not just who you are. That's not trauma alone. That's being undifferentiated. When you are undifferentiated, your family's emotional energy still lives in you everywhere you go. How you see everything goes through this undifferentiated lens. And if you put in a new lens, you would be surprised what you see. I heard something on the radio recently, and they were talking about perspective change. Sometimes I enjoy watching soccer, and soccer will have replays and VAR, and they'll check things out, and they do that in other sports as well. But in soccer, depending upon where the ref's perspective is, he may see the foul, he may not see it based on his perspective. You go to the VAR, you get a different perspective. And then all of a sudden, something may become very clear that it was clearly a foul or not a foul, but your perspective made the difference. The same is true for us. If we stay in our family's lens or perspective, everything's going to be seen that way. If we can shift to a differentiated perspective, a new clarity, a new way of thinking, feeling, and behaving, then we can begin to see things in a whole new light. You absorb guilt and shame and obligation like it's your job. That's another sign of undifferentiation. You perform, you manage, you react, and you feel like no matter how much inner work you do, you never seem to quite arrive. And that's not because you haven't tried hard enough. It's because no one ever gave you the root diagnosis. You don't need to fix all your symptoms. You need to get your family out of you emotionally, and that's what self-differentiation does. Much like with the referee and the VAR and the screen he sees from the screens and video perspective. If you had that perspective all of the time, you would look at the game much differently than if you're only looking from one perspective. If you have a different angle, you will see things all different. What self-differentiation actually looks like. Let me give you a real example. I worked with a couple. Let's call them Serena and Brian. Serena's family is enmeshed. Her mom, sisters, they expect full loyalty, full availability, all of the time from Serena. Brian grew up with an alcoholic father and a grandfather who demeaned him. He carries a deep sense of worthlessness and not feeling special. When Serena's dad turned 80, the family wanted them to spend 4 days visiting. Serena and Brian discussed it and agreed, I think 2 days felt right. That's 2 days is what we should spend there. That decision came from them, Brian and Serena. But then Serena's sister called. How could you only do 2 days? What's wrong with you? And Serena started to crumble. She told Brian she wasn't sure anymore. And so what happened? Brian exploded. You never choose me. I don't ever matter. Now they're both hurt, both shut down, both back in the old patterns. But here's the truth. It wasn't about the 80-year-old father's birthday. It wasn't about the number of days. It was about the emotional systems they were both still trapped in. Serena hadn't emotionally separated from her family, so she could say, 2 days is my preference, and this is what I will be doing. I'm sure that could be a disappointment. I know you would expect me or would like me to come for 4 days, but Brian and I have decided that's what we would like to do, regardless of what Serena's family said or did. Brian hadn't stopped living from the voice that told him he was worthless. And so the past hijacked the present again. And he felt, she's not paying attention to me. She's not holding to what we agreed to, so I'm not important. Now imagine this. If Serena had done her self-differentiation work, she could have heard her sister's guilt trip without absorbing it. She could have said calmly, I understand you're disappointed, as I just mentioned before, but Brian and I decided on 2 days. No anger, no guilt, no collapse. If Brian had done his differentiation work, he wouldn't have exploded. He could have said, I see how your family's pulling you. I still prefer 2 days, but let's talk. That's the difference self-differentiation makes. It doesn't remove problems, it removes your reactivity to them. How does this change your life? When you begin this work, here's what starts to shift. You feel calmer because you're not absorbing everyone else's emotions and emotional and mental toxicity. You can think more clearly because your feelings don't hijack your thoughts. You set boundaries without needing to justify or apologize. You stop performing and start showing up as your real self. And most importantly, you start to recognize this is me. This is who I am underneath the programming. And for the first time in your life, you're not reacting, fixing, fawning, or fighting. You're just being. And it's peaceful. It's powerful. It's real. And I want to say something important here, especially if you've gone no contact with your family or you're thinking about it. And that choice sometimes may be the healthiest and safest thing you can do. For many, it's necessary to protect yourself from abuse, manipulation, or ongoing trauma. But here's what I want you to understand. Going no contact doesn't mean you're differentiated. It could be the beginning or a helpful tool, but it isn't the same as differentiating. And staying in contact doesn't mean you're not self-differentiated. Because you're always connected to your family, whether you like it or not. Even if you haven't spoken to them in years, they still can live inside your nervous system or rent space in your brain, as people say so often. In your guilt, in your shame, in your overreactions, in your sense of responsibility for others' emotions. You can still feel triggered, invisible, or small, even at a distance. That's why the goal isn't about whether you're physically close or emotionally cut off. The goal is to get your family out of you emotionally and mentally so that you define your identity, not the role that they gave you. And as an adult, as a differentiated self, you always have the right to choose the level of relationship you want to have with them. Let me offer you an invitation to start your self-differentiation journey. It's never too late. This isn't easy work. It's not quick. It's not flashy. It's not one-and-done solutions. It's a slow, steady unraveling of decades of emotional glue. It's a return to your true self, and it's worth every step. So if you're ready to stop living someone else's life, if you're ready to stop performing, reacting, or disappearing, then I want to invite you to begin. Start with my free 84-minute self-differentiation training. Doesn't cost you a thing. Listen to it. Sign up for it. Or you can join the Road to Self program, where I spent 45 years of what I've learned putting that into the program, because I can't describe it all in a brief video. You can join the Road to Self program, where thousands have found the clarity, peace, and freedom they've been chasing for years. Click the links in the description. Read the testimonials. No testimonial was made up. They are all genuine. I will never put a fake testimonial on anything. It's ridiculous. What's the point? Subscribe if you haven't yet to this channel. And remember, one calm moment, one non-reaction, one choice to hold on to yourself, that's where it begins. I want to thank you for joining me. Be wise, and I'll see you again soon.